Melbourne, Australia, a city of culture and arts where countless stories unfold each day across its sprawling landscapes and quiet parks. Home to roughly 5 million people, this vibrant metropolis is known for its famous landmarks and thriving arts scene. On a mild June evening in 2018, one story would begin that would deeply affect the entire community. In this bustling city lived a young woman named Eurydice Jane Dixon, born on the 10th of November, 1995. Those who knew her described Eurydice as gutsy, determined, and clever, a person who showed kindness to everyone she encountered and possessed a genuine passion for the arts. Life hadn't always followed an easy path for Eurydice. When she was just 7 years old, tragedy entered her young life when her mother, who had struggled with heroin addiction, passed away from an overdose at a shopping center. Throughout these early difficulties, Eurydice maintained strong connections with her family. She shared a close bond with her siblings, her brother Christopher and her sister Polly, as well as with her father Jeremy. These relationships provided stability and support as she navigated her way through childhood and adolescence without her mother's presence. Those who observed Eurydice as she grew older often remarked that she possessed the natural qualities of a born performer. As a young adult, she began developing a career in stand-up comedy, gradually establishing herself as a formidable and unique voice on Melbourne's comedy circuit. Although naturally more introverted in her personal life, Eurydice began to blossom on stage, channeling her intelligence and life experiences into thoughtful comedy routines that resonated with audiences. Her comedy reflected her values and perspective on the world. Known as a staunch feminist, Eurydice nevertheless possessed the ability to poke gentle fun at herself and her own ideas, showing a self-awareness that enriched her performances. Social issues frequently appeared in her material, presented through her distinctive viewpoint and intelligent analysis. Fellow comedians found her incredibly supportive, with one describing her as a comic's best friend. Even when jokes didn't land exactly as intended, Eurydice could always find humor in the situation and continue with grace. Performing regularly at various comedy clubs around Melbourne, she was steadily building a reputation in the local comedy scene, recognized for her original voice and perspective. On Tuesday, the 12th of June, 2018, Eurydice performed a set at the Highlander Bar, a venue she often visited to try new material. That evening, her performance was particularly well received by the audience. Those who saw her that night later described her as feeling elated by the positive reception of her new material, noting that she seemed on top of the world because of how well her set had been received. After her performance concluded, she left the club and walked with her boyfriend Tony, accompanying him to his tram, before beginning her own journey home, a route she had traveled many times before. As Eurydice approached Prince's Park, she followed her usual routine of removing her shoes to walk barefoot across the grass, moving from west to east through the park she loved. This was something she did every time her path took her through this green space. At 12:02 a.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of June, when she was merely a few hundred meters from her home, she sent a message to Tony. "I'm almost home safe. How about you?" She continued her walk across 2 football pitches and then onto a third, drawing ever closer to the house she shared with her brother and father. At 2:40 a.m., a passerby making his way home from work made a distressing discovery on one of the fields at Prince's Park Sporting Precinct. Upon finding a body lying on the ground, he immediately contacted emergency services and began performing CPR while waiting for their arrival. Paramedics were quickly dispatched to the scene, but despite the best efforts of both the passerby and the medical professionals, they were unable to revive the young woman. Eurydice Dixon was pronounced deceased at the scene. Authorities promptly cordoned off the area, and a murder investigation was launched. Detective Inspector Andrew Stamper requested that anyone who had been in the vicinity between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. come forward, as they might have observed something of significance that could assist with the investigation. Police asked local residents and businesses to check any dashcam footage or CCTV recordings that might help create a clearer picture of what had transpired during those hours. As the investigation proceeded, a post-mortem examination revealed that Eurydice had died as a result of asphyxiation and compression to the neck. The medical examiner also noted that her body showed signs of blunt force injuries across her head and torso, indicating a violent assault had taken place before her death. The news of Eurydice's tragic passing resonated deeply with the Melbourne community and beyond. Nearly 10,000 people gathered at Melbourne Park for a vigil in her memory, showing the profound impact her death had on both those who knew her and those who recognized the broader implications of the violence that had claimed her life. At 6 p.m., the park's lights were dimmed and the space was illuminated only by the soft glow of candles held by those in attendance. Among those present were people who had previously attended similar vigils following the murder of Jill Mager in 2012. Another case where a woman was killed by a stranger while walking home. This somber connection highlighted a pattern of violence that many found deeply troubling. Premier Daniel Andrews attended with his wife Catherine, describing Eurydice's murder as a terrible, terrible tragedy and such a waste, such a senseless, thoughtless, evil act. As the gathering concluded, a choir performed Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, the gentle notes floating through the evening air, creating a moment of collective mourning and reflection. The state government used the opportunity to speak about the need for community attitudes toward women to change. Officials emphasized that the vigil was not only about expressing grief, but also about demanding changes in terms of the way women are seen and treated in our community. This call for societal transformation echoed through conversations in the days and weeks that followed. The following Monday morning brought additional distress when local residents discovered that Eurydice's memorial had been vandalized with inappropriate imagery, causing outrage throughout the community. Many expressed their dismay at this disrespectful act, with one person commenting, "Low, it's lower than low. It's the absolute pits. It's absolutely disgusting. They should just be lifted up to dry." The vandalism struck many as a particularly cruel gesture directed at a community already in mourning. Hours after this discovery, Victoria's Police Chief Commissioner Graham Ashton visited the site to add to the growing memorial and pledged to bring those responsible for both the vandalism and Eurydice's death to justice. He described the crime as terrible and shocking, assuring the public that authorities would work diligently to resolve both matters. In the days that followed, several buildings across Australia, including Melbourne's Town Hall, were illuminated with orange lights, the color used by the United Nations to represent efforts to end violence against women and girls. This visual symbol of solidarity reinforced the community's commitment to addressing the underlying issues that contribute to gender-based violence. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull addressed Parliament regarding Eurydice's death, saying, "Our hearts go out to Eurydice's family, our prayers, our sympathy, our love with them as they grieve her loss. Women must be safe everywhere on the street, walking through a park, in their homes, at work." He continued emphasizing the broader cultural context. We need to ensure that we have a culture of respect for women. Not all disrespect of women ends up in violence against women, but that's where all violence against women begins. The Prime Minister acknowledged that this was not a partisan issue, but a heartbreaking tragedy that united all members in saying, "We must never, ever, ever tolerate violence against women." Eurydice Dixon, we mourn her loss, we grieve with her family, and we say never again. These words reflected a political consensus around the gravity of the situation and the need for change. Meanwhile, the police investigation continued, eventually leading authorities to a young man named James Todd. While in custody at Broadmeadows Police Station, the events of June 12th and 13th became clearer as investigators pieced together his movements on the day of Eurydice's murder. On that Tuesday, Todd had finished his hospitality classes around 3 o'clock in the afternoon and taken a train into the city with 3 classmates. After an unsuccessful attempt to purchase alcohol without identification at one store, he bought vodka and cigarette rolling papers at another location. He and his friends spent time drinking at Batman Park before one friend decided to head home. Todd then purchased cider and later acquired marijuana from individuals in the park. At approximately 8:30 p.m., the group went to Southern Cross Station, where Todd bought whiskey before boarding a train toward Broadmeadows. One of his companions got off at Flinders Street, while Todd disembarked at Newmarket. There, he purchased tobacco before returning to the city, arriving at Flinders Street Station at 10:25 p.m. He proceeded to Elizabeth Street, passing a Woolworths where Eurydice was with Tony at 10:43 p.m. Todd continued to McDonald's for a meal, then walked back to the intersection of Swanston and Flinders, where he observed Eurydice saying goodbye to Tony as he boarded his tram. Standing outside the Young and Jackson Hotel, Todd initially decided to return to the station, but then noticed Eurydice walking alone. At 11:08 p.m., he allowed her to pass by him, then began following her, carefully concealing himself and remaining out of her line of sight. He slowed his pace when she did and hid behind objects along the route, ensuring she remained unaware of his presence. After Eurydice removed her shoes to walk across the park, Todd approached her from behind, grabbing her by her dress and hair before forcing her to the ground. Though Eurydice fought back with considerable effort, scratching his face repeatedly in her attempt to escape, Todd overpowered her. After assaulting her, he strangled her for what he later estimated to be between 5 and 10 minutes. Following the attack, Todd used the front-facing camera on Eurydice's phone to examine the scratches on his face for approximately 10 minutes, showing a disturbing level of self-concern in the aftermath of his violent actions. He then went to Royal Park Station, where he fell asleep on a bench at 2:14 a.m. At 3:55 a.m., he walked back through Prince's Park, where he defecated on one of the tracks. He then walked over to where he had left Eurydice's body, but was instructed to leave the area by police officers who had by then arrived at the scene. At 5:50 a.m., Todd boarded a train home, arriving at his bedroom by 6:37 a.m. He used his iPad to search for information about Prince's Park and read news articles reporting that a woman's body had been discovered there in the early morning hours. He then conducted internet searches for content relating to rape and strangulation, suggesting a continued interest in violent sexual content even after committing the murder. At 6:34 p.m. that evening, Todd received a call from a friend who had seen his photograph on the news as someone police wished to speak with in connection to the crime. Todd searched for the number of the local police station before calling to identify himself as the person in the photograph. His girlfriend and her mother accompanied him to the station where his mother was waiting. Before entering, he assured his girlfriend she had nothing to worry about, providing her with false reassurance about the situation. During questioning, Todd confessed to what he had done, telling officers, "She looked like she was stumbling around. She looked like she was not in a position to defend herself." This statement revealed his predatory mindset and deliberate targeting of someone he perceived as vulnerable. Todd was subsequently charged with the rape and murder of Eurydice Dixon. In a later phone call to his father from prison, Todd expressed disappointment about how the murder had panned out, saying he felt like shit after and hoped the next time would be better. These chilling comments revealed a disturbing lack of remorse and suggested an intention to commit similar crimes in the future, a fact that would later influence sentencing decisions. As investigators examined Todd's background, they uncovered disturbing details about his upbringing and psychological profile. He was the middle of 3 boys raised in what was described as a neglectful and unsanitary home environment. The kitchen floor had rotted to the point of partial collapse, the toilet was non-functional, and every room contained accumulated garbage and rubbish. Several animals also lived in the home, contributing to the unsanitary conditions. When asked if his mother's depression had contributed to these conditions, Todd responded that the house had always been like this, suggesting a long-term pattern of neglect and dysfunction. Todd had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at a young age. In his childhood, he exhibited repetitive behaviors and intense focus on specific interests, such as dinosaurs. At age 12, his school referred him to mental health services due to concerns about his emotional well-being and social interactions. During his teenage years, he received treatment to help regulate his emotions, particularly anger. He gradually spent less time at his family home, occasionally sleeping on the streets, and eventually asked to move in with his girlfriend, staying with her on weekends. While in custody, Todd was diagnosed with sexual sadism disorder. Professor James Ogloff, a forensic psychologist with over 35 years of experience studying pedophiles, murderers, and rapists, later examined Todd and commented on this diagnosis to the media. He explained that the development of this disorder is not entirely understood, but is extremely rare. Ogloff noted, "We don't know why this occurs, but we do know there are people like him whose sexual interests appear to be best satisfied by inflicting pain and ultimately ending the life of someone. It is not driven by their hatred of women. It is a sexual interest. The public wants a simple answer, but there is no quick fix." This expert assessment helped contextualize Todd's actions within a recognized psychological framework, though it certainly did not excuse or mitigate the severity of his crimes. Todd's internet search history revealed that from approximately age 11, he had accessed increasingly violent pornographic content, including searches for snuff films, violent sexual encounters resulting in death, reports indicated he had harbored fantasies about sexual assault and murder from an early age, suggesting a long-term development of his violent sexual interests. On Thursday, June 28th, Eurydice Dixon's funeral was held. Her uncle's sister and former drama teacher were among those who spoke at the service, which included Johnny Cash's "We'll Meet Again" and The Cure's "Pictures of You" as musical selections that reflected her personality and tastes. Friend Kieran Butler offered a moving tribute describing Eurydice as having the mind of a lawyer, able to approach issues from multiple perspectives and genuinely understand viewpoints she disagreed with. Butler elaborated, "She was someone who could attack an issue or idea from polar opposite sides. She could genuinely empathize with and understand a point of view or action that she vehemently disagreed with. This capacity for understanding diverse perspectives was part of what made her comedy so insightful and her friendships so meaningful." The emotional service provided a fitting tribute to Eurydice's life and character, celebrating the person she was rather than focusing solely on the tragic circumstances of her death. Authorities eventually identified and apprehended the individual responsible for vandalizing Eurydice's memorial. Andrew Nolch, 29, pleaded guilty to painting offensive imagery at the site days after her death. He claimed his actions were motivated by what he perceived as man-hating and stated he wanted to make a statement for men's rights. In his own words, "Blatant man-hating upset me so much that I thought I had to make a statement for men's rights." Though he insisted he meant no offense to Eurydice specifically, he acknowledged intending to cause maximum outrage with his actions. The court sentenced Nolch to 200 hours of community service, required him to undergo a men's behavior change program, provide a DNA sample, and pay nearly $20,000 for cleanup costs. After violating his bail conditions by missing work shifts and traveling abroad, he received a 5-month prison sentence. On Thursday, June 14th, James Todd appeared in Melbourne Magistrates Court. His lawyer initially requested that Todd not be identified, citing his autism spectrum disorder diagnosis and concerns about his safety in custody. The attorney also argued that due to the high-profile nature of the case, identifying Todd might make it more difficult to obtain reliable witness statements. The magistrate ruled that while Todd's face would be protected from publication, his identity would not be concealed. No bail application was submitted, and he was remanded in custody. On November 8, 2018, despite previously denying any involvement in the murder of Eurydice Dixon, Todd pleaded guilty to 4 charges: murder, rape, attempted rape, and sexual assault. The court proceedings that followed revealed more details about the case and Todd's psychological state. The court heard testimony from psychological experts regarding his sexual sadism disorder. Dr. David Thomas, testifying for the defense, stated that Todd presented a significant risk of reoffending if released. During assessment interviews, Todd had admitted knowing he would sexually assault someone as soon as he entered the park that night, though he claimed he hadn't decided to strangle Eurydice until the attack was underway. The court also heard that Todd had previously strangled a sexual partner during consensual activity, but had stopped when asked to do so. Dr. Thomas noted this had occurred early in the relationship, before Todd began consuming the type of violent content he accessed in the months preceding the offense against Eurydice. Senior Crown Prosecutor Dr. Nanette Rogers argued this demonstrated Todd's awareness that choking could cause harm, indicating he understood the dangerous nature of his actions. Defense barrister Tim Marsh maintained that Todd had not planned to murder Eurydice, until after initiating the attack, suggesting a degree of spontaneity rather than premeditation in the killing specifically, though not in the attack itself. Todd's girlfriend and female friends testified that despite his dysfunctional upbringing, he had consistently been respectful toward women in his personal relationships. His girlfriend described him as a very normal person who seemed to always be quite happy and really good socially. Another friend characterized him as outgoing and approachable, someone they would seek advice from, and who apologized when in the wrong. These testimonies presented a stark contrast to the violent behavior Todd exhibited on the night of June 12th. The psychological experts disagreed about Todd's level of remorse. Dr. Thomas suggested that while in custody, Todd had begun to comprehend the damage he had caused, showing some development of understanding about the impact of his actions. However, Dr. Ogloff presented a different assessment, noting that Todd had displayed profoundly disturbing behaviors following the murder, such as conducting internet searches related to rape and returning to the park. On the quiet evening of July 20th, 2019, as the clock approached midnight in Western Sydney, emergency services received a call from Sinclair Avenue. The female caller identified herself as Jessica, speaking in a measured voice despite the circumstances she described. "Yes, I can. My fingers are broken," she told the operator when asked if she could hear them. "Mom has had enough of me because I admit I've been a challenge, and this ongoing thing has been going for months and months." Jessica proceeded to explain to the operator that there had been an altercation with her mother. According to her account, her mother had taken her by the hair and pulled her to the kitchen, where a confrontation occurred involving kitchen knives. What followed was a violent episode that resulted in severe harm to her mother. Jessica described leaving her residence afterward, attempting to find assistance from neighbors. When police arrived at the scene, they would encounter Jessica outside, visibly distressed and injured. Senior Constable Anthony D'Agostino was among the officers who responded to the call. Upon arrival, he activated his body camera to document the scene. The footage would later show a young woman standing in the darkness, illuminated only by the officers' flashlights. Her appearance indicated she had been involved in a serious physical altercation. Jessica Camilleri, age 25, was the younger daughter of Vince and Rita Camilleri, a couple of Maltese-Australian heritage. From her early years, Jessica's development had presented challenges for the family. Her developmental milestones, such as walking and talking, had occurred later than typical, and educational professionals had noted these delays during her schooling. Jessica had been diagnosed with several conditions affecting her cognitive and emotional regulation. These included attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, bipolar disorder, and autism spectrum disorder. She also experienced a condition called intermittent explosive disorder, which manifested as sudden episodes of emotional volatility and aggressive behavior. This condition typically begins around age 6 and often intensifies during adolescence and early adulthood. Mental health specialists would later note that these conditions were sometimes exacerbated by social difficulties she experienced, including being the target of negative attention from peers during her school years. When these episodes occurred in educational settings, they often resulted in temporary suspensions. Jessica's social functioning was affected by difficulties with perspective taking and empathy. In 2015, when Jessica was in her teenage years, her parents separated. Her father expressed that he found it challenging to address her behavioral issues and felt that Rita was unable to establish effective boundaries. Rita was deeply committed to her family responsibilities. In addition to providing support for Jessica, she also cared for her own mother. The combined responsibilities created ongoing strain for Rita, which continued to increase over time. Jessica maintained part-time employment as a cashier at a Kmart location in Mount Druitt. During her leisure time, she enjoyed watching horror films, particularly favoring titles such as Saw and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Her social media activity reflected both this interest in horror cinema and her close relationship with her mother. One recurring behavior that Jessica engaged in was making telephone calls to randomly generated numbers, often using her preferred digits, 2, 3, and 5. She would place numerous calls throughout the day, hoping to reach male recipients. When successful, she would sometimes make concerning statements if the person attempted to end the conversation. By 2018, Jessica had begun repeatedly calling a business in Victoria, developing a fixation on the company's manager, a man named Matthew. She contacted various staff members multiple times, occasionally making distressing statements. After approximately 2 months of these calls, Rita contacted the company to express her concerns about her daughter's behavior, indicating she felt uncertain about how to address the situation. She mentioned she would try removing Jessica's phones to curtail the behavior. The calls temporarily ceased, but resumed after about 2 weeks. Jessica then located Matthew's social connections on Facebook and began contacting them as well, including his spouse and extended family members. The frequency of these calls sometimes exceeded 100 per day, creating significant disruption. Matthew reached out to Rita again, expressing that the situation was becoming untenable. Rita explained that Jessica had developed romantic feelings for Matthew after seeing his photograph. Jessica's emotional regulation difficulties manifested in other settings as well. She had been asked not to return to a medical practice after becoming agitated around female patients and requiring intervention. Similar episodes occurred in retail environments and public spaces. On one occasion, she was admitted to a psychiatric unit for 9 days to address a severe mood disturbance. Jessica had been prescribed various medications over time, including antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, and antidepressants, but these appeared to provide limited benefit. By late 2018, Jessica was no longer taking prescribed medications, instead using alternative approaches. Despite these ongoing challenges, Rita remained steadfast in her support for her daughter, consistently advocating for her and providing protection. People beyond the immediate family were aware of the situation. In messages Rita sent to a friend, she described a recent incident. "The other day, I had to call an ambulance because Jess had a meltdown and was getting uptight, and I didn't know what to do. So I called the ambulance at 2 in the morning, and the ambulance came with the police, but they didn't take her to hospital because she hadn't done anything at that time." Rita continued, noting that Jessica got scared and worried at the time because she did not want to go back to the mental health unit hospital again. She needs to wake up to herself because if she doesn't, the police officer who came to my house with the ambulance told me, "If we find ourselves back here and have to come back out to the house for this matter, this time she won't be so lucky." In another message to the same friend Rita mentioned, "I'm just informing you that Jess has changed her Facebook account." She is no longer on her old Facebook account because of that guy she was having problems with. I told her if I were you, I would not be mucking around with this D-head ever again. Otherwise, it is going to be her own grave she will be digging, and she is now scared and worried. Our whole family told her she is playing with fire doing this. Just let the D-head go. He is not worth it by a long shot. Jessica's older sister, Christy, would later explain that in early July 2019, feeling that conventional approaches had been ineffective, Rita consulted a spiritual medium who requested nearly $5,000 to address what was described as getting the demon out of Jessica. Rita provided $2,500, but did not receive any services in return. During that same month, a family acquaintance expressed serious concerns to Rita about Jessica's behavior, suggesting that Jessica might eventually harm someone severely. Rita responded, "Not my Jessica, she wouldn't hurt a fly." On July 19, 2019, Rita accompanied Jessica to the police station regarding the persistent unwanted telephone calls. This was not their first interaction with law enforcement. Over the preceding 6 years, Jessica had received convictions for 2 counts of assault, occasioning actual bodily harm, and 2 counts of common assault. Rather than serving time in a correctional facility, she had been released into Rita's care. On July 20th, 2019, Jessica and Rita were in a parking area when a man walked past them. Following this, Jessica became upset with her mother, believing that Rita had embarrassed her in front of this individual. They proceeded to Jessica's sister's residence, where tensions continued to escalate despite Rita's attempts to calm the situation. Jessica requested a medical professional to visit, but when the doctor arrived, the physician departed quickly, expressing concern for personal safety. Jessica followed the doctor to the driveway, but the doctor was able to enter her vehicle and leave the location. At the time, Rita was supervising her 4-year-old grandson, referred to as Child A, for privacy reasons. Jessica appeared to believe that Rita was giving more attention to the child than to her. At approximately 9:20 p.m., Jessica made several calls to a fast food establishment called Red Rooster, attempting to order additional food. Rita expressed that she had reached her limit, stating she would contact emergency services to arrange for Jessica to re-enter mental health care. The situation deteriorated further, with Jessica following Rita to the bedroom, where a physical altercation began. What followed was a severe, violent episode in the kitchen of the home. Jessica inflicted numerous injuries upon her mother, using multiple kitchen knives, several of which broke due to the force applied. The injuries were extensive and caused fatal harm to Rita. During the incident, the 4-year-old grandson attempted to intervene by striking Jessica with a toy box lid, sustaining minor injuries to his hands, head, and face in the process. He was later treated at a hospital and discharged to family care. After the incident, Jessica went outside with evidence of the altercation and approached neighbors. When police arrived, Jessica made inquiries about medical possibilities for her mother, asking officers, "Can they sew the head back on? Can you bring someone back to life?" "There's nothing you can do. She's a goner, because I know doctors can do miracles." The officer responded that such intervention would not be possible, to which Jessica replied, "I thought doctors can do miracle surgeries." She then asked, "Is anything going to happen to me? Do I get the death penalty?" When informed that capital punishment is not practiced in Australia, she responded, "Okay, so I've got nothing to worry about." The incident received significant attention throughout Australia. Police Detective Superintendent Brett McFadden told reporters, The family is distraught as to what has taken place. This is up there with one of the most significant, most horrific scenes police have had to face. There is no stepping away from the fact that this was horrific and a significant attack, and the injuries that the victims suffered were extensive. It is a very difficult, challenging, confronting investigation. The officers and emergency personnel who responded to the scene were offered counseling services to help process the traumatic nature of their experience. As forensic investigators examined the location and police gathered witness statements, tributes to Rita began appearing. One friend remarked, "To add to the sadness, Rita was looking after her bedridden, frail mother too. This is just horrific. She was fun, irreverent, and vibrant. She loved music and was very community-minded. She connected with everyone because she was lovely." A neighbor commented, "They always seem to have parties all the time, just parties over there. I never heard anything like shouting or screaming. There had been some issues in the past that have made Jessica known to the cops and other groups, but it seems it has gone much further this time." At St. Mary's Police Station, Jessica's hands were covered with evidence bags, and traces of dried blood remained on her body and clothing. She told officers, "She's had enough of me." She was at her wits' end. "I want everyone to know this. I've hurt a lot of people in the past, but I have never laid a finger on my mom until tonight. I understand she has had enough of me because I'm a piece of work." Jessica continued, "My mom lost her patience. I wanted to give her a taste of her own medicine, but not to kill her. I had to keep stabbing her. I think that's what's happened." She also expressed concern about how her family members would regard her after the incident, to which the officer replied that they were understandably very upset. The day following the incident, Jessica appeared in Parramatta bail court via video link charged with murder. She did not apply for bail release and informed the court, "I really need medical attention. I told all the officers and told the police at the station. I cannot move my fingers properly because of the incident. I am not fit to come to jail until I get cleaned up. I could not wash myself properly in the shower to get all the blood off me because of my fingers." The magistrate ordered that she receive medical assessment before her next court appearance. She entered a plea of not guilty to the murder charge, with her legal representative arguing that her mental health conditions had significantly reduced her capacity for self-control. Her attorney suggested that the charge should be modified to manslaughter. While awaiting trial in custody, psychiatrist Professor David Greenberg met with Jessica. He later reported, "After leaving school, she was placed in supportive environments where she had explosive outbursts and was asked to leave. She was unable to cope in all of these environments, so she ended up on disability support pension. She won't lose control on every occasion, loses control when there's a stressor, or she perceives provocation." The psychiatric reports also indicated that Jessica had stated, "I know people will think I'm sick. I thought I'll put her out of her pain. I was so agitated and frustrated because I was thinking sick thoughts." She mentioned to Professor Greenberg that she had been influenced by horror films, telling him to note that information for the judge. She further described the incident to Professor Greenberg. "I wasn't thinking. I was panicky, frustrated, and raged. Mum was slapping me. She grabbed me by the hair. I grabbed my mum. I dragged her all the way to the kitchen by the hair. I saw red. Remember pulling the knife. I wanted to scare her at first. Mom got the knife off me and chucked it away. I was so agitated I lost it. I was stabbing her. I was so angry I think I had sick thoughts. I got it off horror movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Jeepers Creepers, and Saw. Regarding Jessica's personality characteristics, Professor Greenberg noted that she presented as self-centered with a history of seeking attention and becoming distressed when attention was directed elsewhere. He observed, she appeared to have a sense of entitlement and unreasonable expectations of preferential treatment, potentially reacting with intense anger when her needs were not addressed. He indicated she seemed to consider herself unique due to her disabilities and might not fully recognize that others also have emotional needs. While in custody, awaiting trial, Jessica was involved in several incidents. On September 10, 2019, she was charged with assault after throwing a cup of tea at another inmate. Approximately 1 month later, on October 14th, she was confined to her cell for 5 days after another physical altercation with an inmate. On November 3rd, she failed to comply with directions, and in July of the following year, she was fined $200 for damaging property. She received an additional 7 days of cell confinement on November 21st, 2020, following another assault. On November 30th, 2020, the case proceeded to trial at the New South Wales Supreme Court, presided over by Justice Helen Wilson. The proceedings lasted for 5 days. Jessica, now 27 years old, occasionally smiled at court officers as she sat in the defendant's area, accompanied by a support worker. In opening statements, the prosecution noted Jessica's extensive history of assaultive behavior and described Rita as highly protective and defensive of her daughter. The court heard that Jessica had unreasonable expectations of treatment, a pattern of demanding attention, low self-esteem, but a sense of entitlement. When initially questioned by police, she had claimed she acted in self-defense, stating that her mother had threatened to have her admitted to a psychiatric facility and had attacked her. When this was recounted in court, family members were observed making audible sounds of exasperation. Jessica's sister, Christy, provided testimony stating that Jessica constantly sought attention and would make demands of her mother. She added that Jessica would frequently replay favorite sections of horror films and would become highly agitated if these were taken away. Regarding Jessica's behavior, the court heard that Rita had felt unsupported by various service providers over the years and was exhausted by the challenges of providing care for her daughter. Evidence suggested that following Jessica's father's departure, her behavior had worsened as he had provided structure and boundaries. Rita's sister testified that she had discussed Jessica's behavior with Rita on numerous occasions. She was blinded and couldn't see what I could see. She was a mother, and a mother's love knows no boundaries. I pray Jess will get the help she needs so Rita can rest in peace, knowing her daughter is being looked after by a system that let her down. The court also heard from Professor Greenberg, who had extensively interviewed Jessica while she was in custody. He stated, "She prefers to talk to men because that excites her. She's not particularly interested in talking to women. If they insult her or become angry or distressed by her cause, she becomes distressed, and that kicks into her intermittent explosive disorder." He continued, "There's no one disorder that describes her. I'm of the opinion that at the time of the incident, she likely had the capacity to understand the events and judge whether her actions were right or wrong. However, I'm of the opinion that based on the comorbid psychiatric diagnoses, her capacity to control herself was substantially impaired by her abnormality of mind arising from her underlying conditions." The defense called forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First, who testified that he believed Jessica had a long-standing abnormality of the mind and that she understood her actions were wrong. He indicated that the central question was whether she had the capacity to control her behavior, and in his assessment, that ability was impaired. A police constable read a statement describing the scene, providing factual details of what officers had encountered upon arrival. After hearing all testimony and evidence, the jury retired to consider their verdict. Following 2 days of deliberation on December 10, 2020, they returned with their decision. Jessica Camilleri was found not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. During the impact statements presented by family members, Jessica remained expressionless. Her legal representative explained that due to her mental health conditions, she did not process emotions in the same way as others. Outside the courthouse, Jessica's sister Christy spoke to reporters. She had support from many avenues, and unfortunately, I feel that our mental health system let her down, let my mother down, let my whole family down. My mother was a beautiful person, inside and out, a heart of gold, and she would have put anybody in front of her own needs. I have to live with a little boy that has to live with that trauma for the rest of his life. She has no support from our family, so I don't really care what happens to her from this point on or when she is released, and I just hope that it is a lengthy sentence so that way members of the community remain safe. My mother went through every avenue, doctors, psychiatrists, the mental health system itself, and nothing ever pulled through, which led us here. I can't look at her. She took our mother like she was nothing. In delivering the sentence, the judge stated, The unlawful killing of Rita Camilleri on the 20th of July 2019 must be regarded as one of the most serious instances of manslaughter it is possible for any imagination to conjure. A plea of guilty or an offer to enter a plea of guilty can sometimes operate as evidence of remorse. I do not regard it as such in the present instance. Immediately after killing her mother, the offender's concern was for herself. She invented an account of having been attacked by her mother in an attempt to avoid responsibility for what she had done. When her family gave their victim impact statements to the court during the sentence proceedings, the offender seemed uninterested rather than saddened at what were objectively deeply moving accounts of loss and enduring grief. The judge continued, "There is a real issue here of the offender's future dangerousness and a requirement to consider what is needed for the protection of the community. The offender told Professor Greenberg and medical notes record that she had assaulted a number of other people in the community. Since entering custody, and despite the close supervision provided in a custodial environment, the offender has been both criminally charged and institutionally penalized for offending behavior. Upon her eventual release from prison, the offender will not have the support and supervision of her mother, and she will not have her mother to ensure that she attends medical appointments and takes prescribed medication. She will not have a calm and safe family home to go to upon release. The possibility of a violent outburst against someone in the community looms large. The protection of the community must be a significant consideration in light of the extreme gravity of this crime, the very great harm done, and the need to protect the community from the offender. A stern sentence is called for." Before pronouncing the sentence, the judge expressed sympathy to Jessica's sister and family, acknowledging that no judicial outcome could alleviate their loss or diminish their grief. Jessica was sentenced to 21 years and 7 months imprisonment beginning on July 20th, 2019, and ending February 19th, 2041. The non-parole period was set at 16 years and 2 months, with eligibility for parole consideration on September 19, 2035. In a letter to her family, Jessica wrote, "It didn't hit me at first, but then it hit me like a ton of bricks, like a mountain. I know it's my fault that my mother isn't here." In September 2022, Jessica appealed her sentence. Her attorney argued that a reduced sentence should have been given because she had been willing to plead guilty to manslaughter before the trial. She had done everything she could to bring about the outcome that was achieved as early as she could. The lawyer also stated that her behavior had improved considerably since transferring to a different correctional facility. The prosecution opposed the appeal, maintaining that the gravity of Jessica's actions warranted a substantial sentence. However, the appeal was successful, with 2 of the 3 judges granting it. Her sentence was reduced to 16 years and 6 months in custody, with a non-parole period of 12 years. The court noted, objectively, the facts were gruesome and brutal and involved a frenzied attack on an innocent victim in her own home. On the other hand, the offense was spontaneous and the result of Camilleri losing control of herself because of her complex psychiatric illness. Since beginning her sentence, Jessica has been charged with multiple assaults against fellow inmates and correctional officers. In 2021, she was charged with attacking 2 female corrective services officers. One officer told the court, "My hair was ripped from my scalp. I felt lost and isolated for weeks after the assault. While I continue to physically endure pain and discomfort, the psychological toll is what weighs heaviest on me. The assault shattered my sense of security." This officer was subsequently diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. In August 20, with 2 additional counts of common assault after allegedly attacking 2 female guards. An additional 22 months were added to her months. She told the court, "I don't understand. This is a waste of time. They don't like me, and people outside want me to face more time. I'm looking at a long time in jail. I've been targeted because of what the other girls have made me out to be. They single me out in prison because of the nature of my crime. Corrections moved me from that wing where that fight occurred. I don't know what they're doing, but now there's some behavioral wing. They want to keep me there for a month before moving me to the women's prison. No matter what I do, no matter where I go, other prisoners will make my life a living hell. It's not like the outside world. It's hard in here." The residence where the incident occurred was eventually listed for rental occupancy. The case reflects the significant challenges faced by families caring for individuals with complex mental health needs. Rita showed unwavering commitment to her daughter, despite the difficulties demonstrating profound maternal devotion. For those affected by these events, the passage of time may gradually provide some measure of healing. The gentle sound of morning birds chirps softly in the distance as we begin our story. A quiet neighborhood in Riverside, California, is just waking up after the Thanksgiving holiday of 2022. On the morning of Friday, November 25, 2022, as families in Riverside, California were still resting after their Thanksgiving celebrations, a quiet cul-de-sac called Price Court was about to witness something profoundly disturbing. The day began like any other post-holiday morning homes were still with residents enjoying extended sleep after festive meals shared with loved ones. At approximately 6:58 in the morning, a red Kia Soul parked in the neighborhood. From it emerged a man wearing a tan trench coat, a black fedora, and a face mask. He carried a black duffel bag and a plastic bag. The individual walked around the area for a while, pausing outside one particular house, before returning to his vehicle and driving away. This pattern repeated twice more. A neighbor noticing this unusual behavior contacted the Riverside Police non-emergency line to report the license plate. Since no actual crime had been committed, all they could do was make a note of the information. Around 9:00 a.m., Michelle Blandon received a telephone call from her mother, Sherry. Sherry's voice carried an unsettling tension as she explained that a detective was in their house asking to speak with Michelle's 15-year-old niece. The detective had mentioned something urgent happening near the girl's school. Sherry, who was 65, lived in the home with her 69-year-old husband, Mark, a volunteer high school softball and baseball coach, their daughter, Brooke, who was 38, and Brooke's two young girls. Everyone was concerned about what might be happening. They wondered if the teenager had done something wrong or was in some kind of trouble. Sherry mentioned that only she and Mark were home as Brooke had taken her daughters out. The officer indicated he would wait until they returned and would need to interview everyone separately. The situation seemed quite serious. Michelle tried to reassure her mother that it was probably nothing significant, encouraging her to remain calm. Sherry asked the detective if Brooke's other daughter could be dropped off at Michelle's house while they sorted everything out, and he agreed. All they could do was wait for Brooke and the teen to return home. The detective informed Sherry that he would need to speak with the adults first, and when the teenager arrived, she would have to wait in the car along with both her own and Brooke's phones. Michelle felt increasing anxiety as none of this seemed normal or appropriate. However, she trusted that her mother would not have opened the door for just anyone, let alone permitted them inside. The man had presented himself as a police officer with a badge and authority, which had given Sherry reason to trust him. A short while later, Brooke arrived at Michelle's house to drop off one niece, and Michelle observed as Brooke and her 15-year-old daughter departed for Price Court. Michelle called Sherry again to inform her they were on their way and to check if everything was all right. Sherry's voice trembled as she struggled not to cry. She mentioned the detective was still present, but before she could elaborate further, he took the phone from her. "I'm here with your mom," he said in a reassuring tone. "She is kind of being anxious and freaking out. Everything is going to be okay. It's all okay." He returned the phone to Sherry, and Michelle strained to hear their conversation. She heard the detective say that as part of his investigation, he needed to search the teenager's room, specifically mentioning the room with Green Bay Packers memorabilia. Michelle felt uncomfortable at the realization that this person somehow knew the interior layout and contents of her family's home. Before she could express her concern to her mother, Sherry said, "I'll call you back," and ended the call. Michelle had no choice but to wait, so she attempted to dismiss her worries and went into town. Eventually, Brooke arrived at the house, going inside, while her daughter remained in the car, as instructed by the officer. Some time later, Michelle sent a text message to her mother requesting an update, but received no response. At 11:08 a.m., emergency dispatchers received a call requesting a welfare check at Price Court. Several residents were worried after witnessing a man leaving a house with a visibly distressed young girl who had no shoes and appeared to be silently mouthing words to onlookers, though they couldn't determine what she was trying to communicate. The pair walked toward a red Kia Soul parked in a driveway, the same driveway, in fact, where the homeowner had earlier reported the vehicle's license plate. As they approached the car, the resident opened their door and told the man he couldn't park there. The man apologized and said he was departing. He opened the rear passenger door, and the girl entered. He then walked to the driver's side back door and placed the black duffel bag inside. As he turned around, the neighbor noticed what appeared to be red spots on his clothes, possibly blood, though they couldn't be certain. While the girl wasn't physically forced into the vehicle, something about the situation felt deeply concerning. Before the man closed the doors, the girl quietly whispered, "Help me," and the car quickly drove away. Michelle, who was still in town, received a Facebook message from one of her parents' neighbors that read, "Please call me ASAP." Shortly afterward, more calls came into the Riverside Police Department reporting a house fire at Price Court Mark and Sherry's home. Michelle and her husband immediately drove across town while repeatedly trying to call her mother, father, and sister, but no one answered. When they arrived at Price Court, authorities were already there addressing the fire. Windows were breaking due to the heat, and the roof was beginning to collapse. As firefighters entered the home, they discovered the bodies of Mark Sherry and Brooke lying close together near the front entrance. Each had a plastic bag over their head and had been bound and gagged. They were already deceased, and neighbors watched in horror as they were removed from the house. Michelle and her husband arrived shortly afterward, and she attempted to run past the police tape before being pulled back. Her parents' and sister's vehicles were still parked outside, and although it was too early to confirm who had been inside, Michelle soon learned that several bodies had been recovered. As a shaken, Michelle was escorted to the police station. Officers were tracking the red Kia. She informed them about the strange phone calls from earlier and the detective who had been in her parents' house. She emphasized that there was no way this individual would have gained entry without showing identification, as Sherry would never have allowed a stranger inside without proper credentials. Though the police were not yet confirming details, when Michelle described her father's distinctive tattoos, a Green Bay Packers logo on his left arm and a Notre Dame mascot on his right, she was confronted with the devastating reality she had been trying to rationalize her mother. Father and sister had been in the house, and her niece was now missing. Despite initial speculation that the fire had caused their deaths, autopsies later revealed that Mark Sherry and Brooke had likely died from asphyxiation. They had been bound and gagged before plastic bags were placed over their heads, and Brooke's throat had been cut. Evidence indicated that Mark was killed first and that Brooke had fought vigorously against her attacker. 3 of the family's dogs also perished in the fire along with their pet bird. A 4th dog, which had been in the backyard, survived and was taken to a shelter until a new home could be found. For the small, quiet community and everyone who knew the family, it seemed impossible that such a tragedy could happen in their neighborhood. Around the same time these events were unfolding, approximately 2,000 miles away in Virginia, a woman was filing a missing person report for her boyfriend of 5 years, who had suddenly departed and was now unreachable. The couple had been celebrating Thanksgiving together in San Diego with her parents when he unexpectedly began packing to leave, claiming he had exhausted his vacation time and needed to drive back to Virginia, where he had recently purchased a house. This abrupt change wasn't part of their original plan, and the drive would take over a day. She was unaware that he hadn't set off for Virginia at all, but instead had headed for Riverside, California. She would soon discover that it was her boyfriend who was now fleeing with the missing 15-year-old girl. Using the license plate, information provided by the neighbor police in Riverside eventually located the red Kia as it traveled toward Kelso, an unincorporated area of San Bernardino County on a remote rural road. They intercepted the vehicle with a SWAT team and helicopter joining the pursuit. The driver eventually stopped and exited the car, firing his weapon and showing no intention of surrendering. A brief shootout followed as the girl fled from the vehicle. Within moments, the driver was dead. Some reports indicate he turned the gun on himself, while others suggest he was killed by police gunfire. The 15-year-old, whose identity has been protected, was found alive and unharmed. She was placed in protective custody and, along with her sister, began an extensive process of trauma counseling. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $100,000 to be given to the girls. Upon learning of her niece's rescue, Michelle praised the neighbor for diligently reporting the license plate and persisting with authorities believing these actions had saved her niece's life. The man who had kidnapped the girl and killed her family was identified as 28-year-old Austin Lee Edwards, an active Virginia State Deputy Sheriff. Surprisingly, the teenager told authorities she did know Austin, having met him online, though he wasn't who he had claimed to be. They had connected on Omegle, a free online chat platform that randomly pairs users for anonymous conversations using the names You and Stranger. She had been honest about her age, but Austin had misrepresented himself as a 17-year-old. Investigators couldn't determine how long they had been communicating or how he had obtained her address, but at some point, Austin had requested sexual photographs from her. After this request, she stopped corresponding with him. Detectives theorized that he might have killed her family as retaliation or believed that kidnapping her would prevent her from reporting him. They also considered the possibility that he possessed explicit images of her and was attempting sextortion. His messages revealed an obsession, indicating he would stop at nothing to reach her. With over 1 million pages of social media content to analyze, investigators acknowledged that understanding the complete story would take considerable time. The community gathered outside the Winnick family home on Price Court in Riverside, with neighbors holding a vigil for the family killed the day after Thanksgiving. At the memorial, the victim's daughter expressed gratitude for the community's support. "Thank you for being here honoring my family," she said. "To see all of you out here supporting and giving us your strength. We really need it, and we are really appreciative." Members of the Arlington High School baseball team attended the vigil because Mark Winnick had been their coach. The team shared that the world would never fully understand what he meant to them, and other students who attended mentioned how he had positively influenced their lives. Rides home after school, he would always talk to us for an hour. One remembered. "One of my favorite memories is when my sister hit a walk-off, and he just gave my sister and I a big hug after the game." The organizer of the Candlelight Vigil, Joy, noted that Mark Winnick was a local coach who always watched over the neighborhood. "I just feel so much sorrow for the family," she said, "and I wish I could do more and more and more." Investigators confirmed that after setting fire to the home, the suspect left with another relative. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department later verified she was safe following the pursuit and confrontation near Needles. The teenager told police that on the morning of the incident, she had no understanding of what was happening as she and Brooke arrived at the house. Following Brooke's instructions, she had waited in the car. But when it became too warm, she removed her shoes and stepped outside for fresh air before cautiously entering the house to investigate the situation. Upon walking through the door, she immediately saw her grandmother Sherry with a bag over her head and her hands bound. Sherry was still moving slightly. Before the girl could process what she was seeing, Austin appeared, pointed a gun at her, and ordered her to leave with him. It remains unknown where he was driving her, or what conversations may have occurred in the car. With Austin deceased and unable to provide his account, investigators turned their attention to understanding who he was and what they could learn about him. In July 2021, Austin Edwards had joined the police academy, and after graduating a year later, he was assigned to Henrico County within the Richmond Division of Virginia. He resigned from the department after a few months, though no reason was documented in his personnel file. A month after leaving Austin, maintained an association with the Washington County Sheriff's Office and joined the Patrol Division as a Virginia State Deputy Sheriff less than 2 weeks before driving to California. In a small town with fewer than 2,000 residents, Austin had purchased a new home. Neighbors described him as friendly and felt a sense of security knowing a police officer lived nearby. Austin had spent considerable time darkening all the windows of his home, but less than 10 days after moving in, both he and the Winnick family would be dead in another state. According to Smith County, Virginia records, Edwards had recently purchased a home in Saltville from Jacob Gordon. "I had the house on the market for just a few hours and I got a full price offer," Gordon recalled. "I was told it was a Virginia state trooper. He was only behind me for about 8 days. He was actually very nice, accommodating. He offered to help me on my home." After purchasing the property, Edwards appeared to have covered the windows and installed dark curtains. "I thought it was really weird," Gordon noted. "The owner told me also that he required that they sent a video of the basement. I mean, he didn't see the property before he purchased it, but he required a video of the basement, which seemed really weird." Another neighbor commented, "The guy who lived in front of him that I know said that he had a very strange presence, that the guy was very weird, creepy, kept to himself. He didn't get out a lot. Short time here, he already set off alarms." As the investigation unfolded in Washington, a woman scrolling through Instagram encountered a photograph that made her pause. It was Austin. Not only was the news story disturbing, but she also had her own troubling history with him. She had met Austin on Omegle as well. He was 20 at the time. She was just 13, and he had groomed, stalked, and harassed her for years. "I read the whole story, and it made me feel disgusting," she said. After learning about what happened to the Winnick family in California, the now 21-year-old woman approached authorities with nearly 4,000 messages between them from years earlier. Austin had initially been sweet and conversational, and she had immediately disclosed that she was 13, but this didn't discourage him from continuing their communication. He soon began requesting nude photographs and professing his love for her. He frequently mentioned self-harm as a form of release. During one exchange, he insisted she join him on Skype. "I can't yet," she told him. "Why's that?" he replied. "Because my mom," she answered. "Kill her," he responded. "I'm going to give myself a black eye." "Okay," she replied. "Listen, there's no obstacle that's going to stop us from being together. If that's what we both want. It doesn't even matter if you're 14 and not technically allowed to do shit yet," he said. She eventually terminated contact with him, but he persistently tried to reach her. The messages also revealed a significant incident from 2016, 2 weeks after the teenager had told him she no longer wanted to communicate. Austin was detained for psychiatric evaluation after threatening suicide and violence against his father. Police had been summoned to the home by Austin's father, Christopher, who they found trying to restrain Austin on the kitchen floor, which was covered in blood. Christopher had bite marks on his arms. Officers prepared to use a taser, but Christopher indicated he could manage the situation, still attempting to protect his son. Austin was eventually handcuffed, secured to a stretcher, and admitted to a hospital. He explained that he had argued with his girlfriend and was acting out in anger, his girlfriend being the 14-year-old who was trying to distance herself from him. Despite blocking him on every platform, he created new accounts and consistently found ways to contact her. The harassment continued for years, until she turned 18 when it suddenly ceased. It's unclear whether this coincided with his meeting the 15-year-old online, though the timing aligns with this possibility. When committing Austin to a mental health facility in 2016, the judge stated there was a substantial likelihood, as a result of mental illness, he will in the near future seriously harm himself or suffer harm. The incident also led the judge to revoke his gun rights under Virginia law, which stipulates that anyone held on a temporary detention order and subsequently admitted to a treatment facility is prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms until those rights are restored by the courts. His gun rights were never reinstated. On his application to the academy, Austin disclosed that he had voluntarily admitted himself to a mental health facility, which required him to undergo a mental health evaluation and examination, which he failed. Austin used his father, a close friend, and his Virginia State Police field training officer as references for the academy. Despite the failed evaluations and the court's revocation of his gun rights, he was still accepted. Michelle and her family sought answers about how someone with Austin's background could be hired by law enforcement, but initially received little response. The Washington County Sheriff stated it was shocking and sad to the entire law enforcement community that such an evil and wicked person could infiltrate law enforcement while concealing his true identity as a computer predator and murderer. But the Virginia State Police claimed he hadn't displayed any warning signs. They described him as the nicest person who loved helping people in his job, adding that he had no reprimands, no complaints, no instances of use of force, levied no internal investigations, and no disciplinary investigations. Michelle noted that no department ever apologized or even acknowledged her family's loss for a considerable time. In a public statement, she said, "My family and I truly appreciate the love and the compassion that we have received thus far in this trying time." If something like this horrific tragedy can happen here in our neighborhood, in our community, it can happen anywhere. In this tragic moment of our family's grief, we hope some good will come from this. She continued, "Parents, please know your child's online activity. Ask questions about what they are doing and whom they are talking to. Anybody can say they're someone else, and you could be in this situation, which I do not want for the world. This horrific event started with an inappropriate online romance between a predator and a child. We have some solace that this person will never harm anyone again. But we also want to make it very clear that we do not applaud his death. This was an adult that traveled across the country to kidnap a 15-year-old girl, my niece, our family member. He took an oath to protect, and yet he failed to do so. Instead, he preyed on the most vulnerable. When you hear the term catfishing, you think of a long-running dating show or series about a national sports figure, both glamorizing and sensationalizing online relationships. However, in this instance, catfishing led to the deaths of the three most important people in my life. Please, parents, guardians, when you are talking to your children about the dangers of their online actions, please use us as a reference. Tell our story to help your parenting not out of fear, but as an example of something that did happen. There are no words for the gratitude we feel for the outpouring of support that we have received. And I know that we will continue to receive from my two young nieces who are now left motherless. We hope that this community can wrap your arms around them and lift them up. They have the most difficult journey ahead as they are minors, and they don't understand everything that has happened. We hope and we ask that this community continue to shelter them. Please positively support them. Eventually, the Virginia State Police issued a statement describing it as an isolated incident, adding that human error resulted in an incomplete database query during Edwards's hiring process. They stated that had they known about his history, he would not have been hired. Riverside Police Chief Larry Gonzalez commented, "It's disturbing. It's disgusting. Anybody in the law enforcement community, we hate that person more than anybody because it's a reflection on us." This is yet another horrific reminder of the predators existing online who prey on our children. If you've already had a conversation with your kids on how to be safe online and on social media, have it again. If not, start now to better protect them. After these failures came to light, Governor Glenn Youngkin requested a comprehensive investigation by the state's watchdog agency. A subsequent agreement allowed the Virginia State Police to conduct an internal investigation. Michelle and her family filed a notice of intent to sue regarding Austin's hiring process and the failures that had occurred. We want to know why this person was able to get hired by not one, but two agencies, and given a firearm when he couldn't legally buy one, she said. Her attorneys argued that Austin's employers demonstrated negligence, gross, negligence, negligent, and gross, negligent hiring breach of mandatory duties and other violations of Virginia state law. They contended that the family's damages exceeded $100 million. Though Austin is deceased and unable to provide information, police continue to examine his past, his laptop, and his phones to identify potential additional victims and construct a more complete understanding of his actions. However, with so many pages of messages from just two individuals thus far, investigators acknowledge they could be uncovering details for years and might never fully know the truth. Mark, Sherry, and Brooke, along with their beloved pets, died in frightening circumstances, terrified, and trying to protect one another. Michelle described them as people who lived and loved selflessly. Mark was deeply appreciated by the young athletes he coached, leaving a significant impact on many, with some indicating he had shaped their futures and career aspirations. He would regularly check on former players to see how they were progressing in college. His neighbor remembered him as someone who never rested and enjoyed staying active, often offering to mow others' lawns to help them and occupy his time. Sherry cherished being with her family above all else. Celebrations like Thanksgiving and Christmas were her favorite times of year, when everyone could simply be together, and she would bake cakes and cookies for her children and grandchildren. Make munchel? We had a family debate, and it got heated on if the brownies my mom made should be frosted with sprinkles or just left plain, Michelle recalled. Little did I know on that day that would be the last time my husband and I would see my parents and sister again. Brooke was a single parent, and Michelle said her greatest joys were watching her daughters grow and collecting Starbucks cups. Brooke was telling everyone that her daughter had joined the color guard at school, and nothing made her prouder than watching her. Michelle remembered with a smile. For the girls and Michelle who remained, it is impossible to imagine how they face each day. Celebrations such as birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgiving will never be the same, and what should be joyful family gatherings will always serve as painful reminders of what was taken from them. In a touching tribute, Price Court in Riverside was ceremoniously renamed Winneck Court, with the sign placed next to the Winneck home. Eric Mark's nephew and godson reflected Mark and Sherry's pride and joy were their kids, and by extension, their grandchildren. You never saw them beam so brightly than when they were around their family. As night falls over Riverside, the neighborhood grows quiet once more, forever changed by the events of that Thanksgiving weekend. The memory of Mark Sherry and Brooke Winneck continues to echo through the community they loved, a reminder of both the warmth of family bonds and the importance of protecting those we hold dear. The evening light was fading over South London as summer drew to a close in August 2012. In the close-knit community of New Addington, no one could have anticipated the events that would unfold within one family home, forever changing the lives of those connected to 12-year-old Tia Christine Sharp. Let us begin by understanding the young girl at the center of this story, her family connections, and the circumstances that would lead to her disappearance. Tia Christine Sharp entered the world on June 30th, 2000, born to parents Stephen and Natalie. Though her parents separated when she was still an infant, Tia grew up surrounded by family in Croydon, South London. The separation did not diminish the close bonds within her maternal family. Tia, her mother Natalie, and her maternal grandmother Christine formed what many described as a tight family unit. Natalie would later reflect that the three of them were not just family, but friends as well. The connection between Tia and her grandmother Christine was particularly special. At times, Tia would even call her grandmother Mom, a term of endearment that Christine accepted without question. I wouldn't bat an eyelid, Christine once said about these occasions. The love between Tia and her mother Natalie was equally profound. Christine observed how Tia adored her mother, and the two were often described as inseparable. During her early years, Tia maintained regular contact with her father Stephen, seeing him during holidays. However, this relationship began to deteriorate as she entered secondary school, coinciding with increased tension between her parents. Those who knew Tia described her as confident and happy, a young girl who was never afraid to express herself. She was, in her mother's words, often the loudest in the room, displaying a feisty and brave personality that made her stand out. In 2002, Christine was working as a barmaid at a pub in Rains Park, southwest London. It was here that she met Stuart Hazel, a man 10 years her junior. Their relationship began in 2007, and Stuart eventually moved into Christine's home in New Addington. This living arrangement would later become significant in Tia's story. It's worth noting that Natalie had briefly been involved with Hazel before he began his relationship with her mother. Despite this potentially awkward situation, Tia developed a close bond with Stuart. She called him Granddad, as did her two younger brothers, integrating him into their family circle. Although Tia was academically capable and popular with her teachers, her school attendance became a concern. In 2008, social services became involved with the family due to concerns about Natalie and her partner using cannabis. A report issued by social services noted that while there was no evidence of neglect or abuse toward Tia, the family dynamic was described as dysfunctional. After conducting an investigation into what they termed Tia's chaotic home life, social workers concluded in November 2011 that no further assessment would be needed. Instead, they recommended that Tia's school should monitor her and report any concerns that might arise. Tia frequently spent nights at Christine and Stuart's home. Even when Christine worked night shifts, Tia would stay there with her step-grandfather. The trust placed in Stuart was evident in June 2012 when Tia celebrated her birthday with her mother and grandmother. Given the option to bring a friend for the celebrations, she chose Stuart, illustrating the close relationship they had developed. The summer of 2012 was drawing to a close when Tia, without her mother's knowledge, messaged her grandmother and Stuart, asking if she could stay with them for a couple of days. Stuart sent a text message to Natalie, informing her that Tia was welcome to stay. He mentioned that Christine would not be there, but Tia could still stay if she wished. Tia was excited about the visit. She kissed her mother goodbye before setting off to her grandmother's house. On Thursday, August 2nd, Stuart met Tia as she disembarked from a tram at 4:50 p.m. CCTV cameras captured them shopping together in New Addington. Later that evening, Christine called home and spoke with Stuart, who assured her that everything was fine and that he and Tia were playing on the PlayStation together. The following day, Friday, August 3rd, Christine returned home from work. Stuart informed her that Tia had gone into Croydon, about 5 miles away, to buy new shoes at the Whitgift Center. By 6 o'clock that evening, Tia had not returned home. Christine called Natalie, who confirmed she hadn't seen her daughter either. They attempted to contact Tia via text message and Facebook, but received no response. Christine and Stuart decided to drive around the area searching for Tia, hoping that perhaps she was delayed due to public transportation issues. By 10 p.m., with still no sign of the young girl, Christine, Stuart, and Natalie went to the police station to report her missing. Stuart told investigators that he had last seen Tia around midday before she headed into Croydon to go shopping. A neighbor also reported seeing her leaving the property. The police searched the house where Tia had been staying, but found no trace of her. As it became clear she wasn't in the house, the investigation expanded to the surrounding area. The story of the missing 12-year-old quickly gained attention, with major news outlets reporting on her disappearance. Stuart Hazel was seen participating in one of the search efforts for Tia. The police noted that Tia had only taken a small amount of money with her and had left behind her travel card and mobile phone, which they described as very out of character. Commander Neil Basu emphasized that the investigation was still being treated as a missing persons inquiry and did not suggest there were any suspects in the case. The family want Tia home. They miss her dreadfully, and I wanted to assure you of all the work the Met is doing, Commander Basu stated. We are doing everything we can, everything we possibly can, to find her and trying to support the family at this time. The scale of the search operation was substantial. Olympic resources were redirected to help find Tia, with more than 100 extra uniform officers deployed to the Croydon and Mitcham areas. Over 80 officers were assigned to the case, including 40 detectives and 40 specialist search officers. They collected more than 800 hours of CCTV footage from buses and trams, viewing more than 120 hours in real time as the search continued around the clock. Commander Basu also acknowledged the community's support. I would also like to thank everybody in the Croydon and Mitcham communities that has helped with the investigation. I spent time with counselors and with members of the Pathfinders charity on the New Addington estate yesterday evening. I was completely moved by their generosity, their energy, and commitment. The family's distress was palpable. Natalie told a local news outlet, "We all feel terrible. We think she's been taken, but we just don't know. There's no CCTV. We know absolutely nothing. I wish to God I could tell you something. My baby girl walked out and she vanished." On August 7th, a press conference was held where DCI Nick Scola provided the media and public with a description of Tia. He referenced a CCTV image taken on the evening of Thursday, August 2nd, before she went missing. In it, she's wearing the outer clothing that we believe she was wearing when she went missing. He explained, noting some differences from the initial description. It's not a yellow tube-type top. You can see it's a yellow vest top. On the front of it, there's a pattern, an animal of some description, possibly a dog or a cat. The tight-fitted jeans are the same. And she's wearing Ugg boots in this photo, but she was wearing black Nike trainers with the pink Nike swoosh on. Tia's uncle David Sharp made an emotional appeal during the press conference. Tia is a 12-year-old normal girl. She has never run away. She's got no reason to run away. She is a playful child. She's not an adult in any way. But she is very clued up in traveling and local areas and people she knows. Come to us. Come home, phone the police, anything. He thanked the police for their efforts and the public for their support, urging them not to stop searching. The public responded with 55 different reported sightings of Tia, though none could be substantiated by police. As Stuart Hazel was the last person to see Tia alive, he began to feel that he might be considered a suspect. On August 9th, he contacted ITV to give an interview, hoping to clear his name. He spoke with Mark Williams Thomas, an investigative journalist and former police officer. During the interview, Hazel denied any involvement in Tia's disappearance. If they believe what they read in the papers, they can do whatever they like. Because I know deep down in my heart that Tia walked out of my house. She walked out there. I know damn well, because she was seen walking down the pathway. I know she made that track down that way. What happened after that, I don't know. He expressed frustration about the media coverage, adding, "We got all the papers outside, all putting accusations down and bad-mouthing everyone, and it's just what you don't need. I mean, they're trying to help, but they can help in other ways by finding the girl." During the interview, Christine returned home, and Hazel paused the interview to comfort her. With still no sign of Tia, the police conducted another search of the house, this time with assistance from police dogs, but again found no trace of the missing girl. A week after Tia had been reported missing on Friday, August 10th, and a day after his interview with ITV, Stuart Hazel woke early and left the house. When Christine woke later, she noticed an unusual smell in the house, but couldn't identify its source. When police arrived, they asked her to leave immediately so they could conduct another search. That afternoon, during a fourth and final search of the New Addington house, investigators made a devastating discovery in the attic. They found a body that, due to the heat, and the fact it had been wrapped up and stored in the attic had decomposed to the point where visual identification was impossible. Croydon Central MP Gavin Barwell commented, "The police have yet to formally confirm that the body is Tia's, yet this devastating development will come as a huge blow to her family and the community in New Addington, all of whom have worked tirelessly to try and find her over the past week." A post-mortem examination began the same day, but was paused later. By August 16th, the examination was still incomplete. However, at an inquest into the death opened that day, it was confirmed that the body was indeed that of Tia Sharp. Due to the state of decomposition, dental records had been used for identification. The post-mortem was later concluded without establishing a definitive cause of death. Experts noted that the delay in finding the body had made it much more difficult to determine exactly how Tia had died. Without a cause of death, the prosecution would face challenges in building their case. Nevertheless, detectives suspected, and it was widely reported, that Tia Sharp had potentially been smothered, although this was not officially confirmed as the cause of death. Area Commander Neil Basu stated that the priority now was to support Tia's devastated family as investigators worked to determine exactly what had happened. With the discovery of Tia's body, attention quickly focused on one person, Christine's partner, Stuart Hazel. Investigators soon realized that Hazel had fled. CCTV captured him, buying a bottle of vodka from a shop on Cannon Hill Lane in South London. Police warned the public not to approach him if they saw him and instead to call 999. Following a tip from a member of the public who had spotted him, Hazel was arrested at 8:25 p.m. on Cannon Hill Common in Morden. As he was taken away in a police van, bystanders directed verbal abuse at him. Police also announced 2 additional arrests. Later that evening, at 11:55 p.m., Christine was arrested on suspicion of murder, and a neighbor was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. While Christine was being questioned, Natalie had to watch on television as her daughter's body was removed from the home. Due to the state of decomposition, Natalie was not permitted to see her daughter's body. Following the discovery, several people placed tributes for Tia near a garage close to her grandmother's house, which remained cordoned off. Christine was later released on bail, but was prohibited from contacting Natalie or her other grandchildren. As the investigation progressed, police began to uncover disturbing truths about Stuart Hazel. He came from a troubled background and had a dysfunctional relationship with his parents. During his childhood, he had been monitored by social services as his father was in prison, and his mother worked as a sex worker. Hazel eventually ended up in foster care. He struggled academically and frequently missed school. Dr. Carrie Nixon, a psychological expert, noted that Hazel had a low IQ. Hazel later claimed that he had been sexually assaulted when he was 16 years old. His criminal record included 30 previous convictions, resulting in 3 prison sentences. These convictions ranged from drug-dealing burglary and criminal damage to theft, racially motivated violence, and grievous bodily harm. His ongoing drug use contributed to his reckless behavior. In 2010, he was convicted of carrying a machete and received a 12-month custodial sentence. Despite his history, Christine remained supportive of Hazel, stating that she never witnessed violent behavior in their home. She described him as a gentle giant and was willing to put his past behind them. However, she was unaware of the extent of his drug abuse and his increasingly disturbing thoughts. Investigators discovered that as Tia matured, Hazel had developed sexual fantasies about her. He became fixated on her and convinced himself that she had feelings for him. In the final year of her life, his behavior grew more voyeuristic, and he began secretly filming her. On one occasion, he recorded her applying cream to her dry legs after returning from school. His filming of Tia became increasingly inappropriate, including recording her while she slept. Nick Scola, the senior investigating officer, described one such incident. Hazel had filmed Tia while she was asleep, approaching very close to her, but retreating when she stirred. He then briefly directed the camera to the wall to capture his shadow looking over her. Hazel had removed the door to the bathroom and tampered with the light fitting in Tia's bedroom, which police believed was to create a way to observe her without detection. He also began searching for increasingly extreme and violent pornographic content on his phone, including material exploiting children. Dr. Carrie Nixon suggested that Hazel may have made sexual advances toward Tia and murdered her when she rejected him and threatened to tell her mother. Many questioned why it had taken 4 searches to find Tia's body in the attic. Investigators apologized to the family, attributing the oversight to human error. Commander Neil Basu apologized to Tia's mother for the delay, stating that a review would be conducted to ensure such a failing would not be repeated. On August 23rd, Police Commissioner Bernard Hogan Howe addressed the failure. If we thought it was an individual human error, then that would explain it. But we're carrying out a review because we're not happy that explains it. We're trying not to have a knee-jerk reaction. We need some time to understand what happened and what failed to happen. We want to learn lessons from this particular case. We have apologized, and I repeat that apology to Tia's mom and family for not having found Tia's body sooner. As Christine was released on bail, investigators focused on Stuart Hazel. When questioned about Tia's murder, Hazel initially requested legal representation. He provided a defense statement claiming that he and Tia had been playing when she fell down the stairs, but appeared unharmed. He alleged that after drinking heavily that evening, he passed out and upon waking, found her dead on the floor. In response, he placed her body in the attic, positioning her between the rafters and against the roof in a dark area, covering her with debris. Next to the body, carefully wrapped in small plastic bags inside a black bin bag, were Tia's clothes and her broken glasses. Christine was subsequently cleared of any involvement in her granddaughter's death. On December 7th, the Metropolitan Police announced she would not face charges. During their investigation, officers had found 2 memory cards, one of which was well hidden in a downstairs door frame. These cards contained both deleted and undeleted photos and videos. The last image on one card had been deleted but was recovered by forensic experts. It showed Tia posed in a sexually suggestive position. Pathologists determined she was likely deceased when the photograph was taken. Other images showed Hazel posing naked in a similar position. The memory card also contained voyeuristic images of Tia taken while she was alive. In the early hours of August 12th, Hazel was charged with the murder of Tia. He appeared before Camberwell Green Magistrates Court on August 13th via video link, wearing a blue t-shirt. He spoke only to confirm his name, date of birth, and address. No plea was entered, and the case was committed to the Old Bailey Courthouse in London. Hazel was remanded in custody to Belmarsh Prison, where he was held in isolation for his safety. While awaiting trial, Hazel wrote to his father, maintaining that Tia's death was accidental and denying any sexual motive. His primary concern appeared to be that his father wouldn't think he was a nonce, a slang term for a pedophile. Tia was cremated on September 14th after a private family funeral. On February 5th, 2013, the neighbor who had been arrested was charged with wasting police time after falsely telling police he had seen Tia alive on the day she was murdered. He appeared at Croydon Magistrates Court on February the 28th, 2013, denied the charge, and was released on bail for a one-day trial scheduled for July 29th. On August 5th, 2013, he was found guilty and sentenced to 5 months in prison. The trial of Stuart Hazel began with his plea of not guilty. Throughout the proceedings, he showed no emotion and refused to acknowledge any of Tia's family members. The courtroom was deeply affected when shown the images taken of Tia. When the post-mortem photograph was presented to the jury, Tia's mother, Natalie, left the courtroom in distress. After 4 days of distressing evidence, Stuart Hazel changed his plea to guilty. Tia's father stated that hearing what Hazel had done to his daughter had shattered his heart. The police described Hazel as a violent and dangerous man who poses a significant risk to young girls. However, Hazel refused to reveal exactly what had happened that night or why he had taken Tia's life. When sentencing Hazel, the judge emphasized how the trust Christine and Natalie had placed in him had been broken. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 38 years, meaning he would be at least 75 years old before being eligible for parole. Judge Mr. Justice Nicole explained that he could not impose a whole-life tariff as he was not certain that Hazel's motivation was sexual or that the murder was premeditated. Tia's mother trusted you to look after Tia, the judge told Hazel. You breached that trust in the most grievous way possible. Your guilty plea came on day 5. You said you wished to avoid causing further stress to Tia's family, but they have had to endure 4 days of a very public trial. The announcement of the sentence prompted gasps from the public gallery. Tia's family sobbed audibly, and as Hazel was led away, someone in the gallery shouted, "Beast!" The judge later explained his sentencing decision, noting that to impose a whole-life tariff, he would have needed to be absolutely certain that the murder itself was sexually motivated. While he had no doubt that Hazel had sexually assaulted Tia, he could not be sure that the murder itself was sexually motivated. In his sentencing remarks, the judge told Hazel, "Tia was a sparky girl who was full of life, but you took that life from her. All that lay ahead of her, a career, loves, and family of her own, will now never be." After the sentencing, Tia's mother, Natalie, was asked if she was satisfied with the sentence. She simply replied, "No," and an uncle added that the sentence should have been longer. The impact of Tia's death resonated deeply throughout the community and beyond. The house where Christine and Stuart had lived and where Tia had been murdered was demolished in 2013. In July 2013, Tia's father, Stephen Carter, expressed support for a plan to have websites block certain search terms and warn people when they attempt to view illegal content. In November 2013, partly in response to the murders of Tia Sharp and another young victim, April Jones, the search engines, Google and Bing, modified their systems to block results from searches aimed at producing child abuse images. Tia Sharp was a confident, happy, and spirited young girl whose trust was betrayed in a profound way. Those who knew and loved her are determined that she will be remembered for the joy she brought to many people rather than by the tragic circumstances of her death. The summer evening fades to night, and with it we conclude the story of Tia Sharp, May she rest in peace, and may those who loved her find comfort in their memories of the bright, vivacious child who once filled their lives with happiness.